Telling you the story about Douglas / Donna Perry, the Spokane murderer. Excuse any background noises. I'm in my garage right now, so not much is known about Douglas's background. However, from what I have gathered, Douglas was born in the countryside of Washington in a small town of Spokane. Douglas was the youngest of his family, his mother, his father, and his older brother. Early on into Douglas's childhood, he had faced many problems and issues. For starters, he was molested by his father. To add on to this major issue, Douglas was also physically, emotionally, and sexually abused. Although Douglas did have an older brother, he was still picked on a lot in his house. He was also picked on at school. This had caused Douglas to feel very isolated and alone and almost seen as an outcast. This isolation had caused him to become somewhat obsessed and attached with firearms. By the age of 21, Douglas had a collection of pistols and rifles. Before Douglas could get arrested for murder, he was actually incarcerated for multiple crimes before, such as in 1987, where he was arrested for reckless endangerment, 1988 for possessing a pipe bomb, while also being found with possession of multiple firearms, and also the final time, 1989, where he was pulled over and found with a gun and knife, where he would subsequently serve 18 months in jail. This 18-month period where he served time in jail would actually help investigators figure out his motivation for murdering these people. From the late 70s all the way into the 80s, Douglas had killed 3 people. These 3 people would be Yolanda, Nikki, and Kathy. These women had one thing in common, and is that they were all prostitutes. Douglas had seen Yolanda on the street and had lured her into his car, where he would then take her home. However, while at his home, Douglas would kill her with 3 bullet wounds into the back of her head. Similarly, Nikki was lured into Douglas's car, where she would also be killed at his house later on. Although Kathy was killed as well in the same way, she put up a fight, and it's this fight that would actually help investigators catch Douglas. Douglas had a spot where he would usually dump these women at. It was off the side of the road near an embankment next to a river. However, while at this embankment, Kathy had actually put up a fight and had left scratch marks on Douglas's arms, which would then be used for investigators to help find DNA samples to catch Douglas. Although Kathy did put up a fight, Douglas would eventually kill her in the same spot that he dumped the same 2 girls before her. A trend within these girls' deaths is that usually their bodies would be found naked and somewhat bound. Douglas's motivation for these murders were because he had seen these prostitutes as disposable and even as scum. When Douglas was incarcerated back in 1989, he had a cellmate that had stated Douglas had revealed that he had murdered the 20 people, and these 20 people he had seen them as pawn scum. Cellmate claimed Douglas was jealous that the woman that he had killed could reproduce, but chose not to. This angered Douglas as he himself could not reproduce, but these prostitutes could, yet they weren't doing so. So he seen them as a waste. This actually showed why Douglas had chosen prostitutes as the group that he would prey on and usually kill. Douglas had seen these prostitutes as a waste, as they could reproduce life, yet they chose not to reproduce. Douglas had finally been caught after DNA samples that had been found at the crime scene of Kathy Brispos. A thumbprint that was under a water bottle, green fabric that had been found on all 3 of the victims, and some of the DNA that was found underneath Kathy's nails. Although Douglas was convicted in 2012, he still had many close calls that was leading up to it. In these close calls, many officers had perceived him as someone very dangerous from the crimes that he committed, but also because he looked like a dangerous person. I wouldn't say we should judge people off the cover of books, but he definitely looks like he did that, bro. I'm not gonna lie. When Douglas was finally caught, he was now going under the name Donna. He had had his sex change, and people think it was to hide his identity so he wouldn't get caught. However, Donna had stated that Douglas was the person causing all these murders, and that Donna put an end to it. Douglas had felt like he was a woman trapped inside of a man's body. However, he hated women and killed them because he seen them as useless. When investigators had tried to ask Donna why she had murdered those 3 people, she had stated that wasn't her and that it was all Douglas's doing. she had believed that she put an end to Douglas's killing when she became Donna. However, this did not hold up in court, and she is currently serving a life sentence without parole for the first-degree murder of Kathy Brisboe, Nikki Lowe, and Yolanda Sapp.